Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is bringing the shadow to light. So yesterday we talked about transmutation of the shadow and embracing it. And today we're going to talk about what's that process? What's actually the process of bringing this darkness to light. So it should be an interesting expansion on what we were talking about yesterday. So before we begin, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, all your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together and very softly rub your fingers against your palms to feel the tickling and the tingling and the wonderful sensation, and allow that sensation to bring you present right here, right now, to this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Rosalind. So good to have you here with us this morning, and welcome to everyone else who's joining us. Just as a reminder from the very outset, if you want to put comments into the chat and you want me to respond, please go to the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and you can put your comments in there. Those are the comments that I see through this feed. So I'm eager to have you engage with us. Anyway, so bringing the darkness to light, or bringing the shadow to light, what does that entail? And, we talk about embracing the shadow, but I think that we get to look at what it takes to recognize the shadow to begin with, what it takes to be willing and able to bring the shadow to light, because so often we compartmentalize our experiences. So when we have terrible experiences, when we have traumas, when we act in ways that we'd rather we hadn't acted, then what happens is that we often sequester those things away in neat little packages that we push to the deep recesses of our mind and of our memory and of our being. We often actually forget these things as an act of self-defense, I'm going to say, as a way to protect ourselves from the darkness that they may hold. And the thing about that is that those things stay there, that we lock them away in these deep, dark caverns, and they stay there and they fester. And they often fester in ways where they end up showing up in health. Our bodies are wonderful, wonderful metaphors for our psyche. And, it's really interesting. As an example, I was talking to somebody who would be a potential client, and we were looking for what we might work on. And I don't know how it eluded me at the moment. I've been replaying this, but this person has had carpal tunnel, and to such an extreme that they got numbness in all their fingers, and had surgery, but the numbness has persisted. And I think that in my conversation with this person, based on some other things that they said, that the fingers, the numbness in the fingers is symbolic in their body for being out of touch, for being dissociated from the world, literally being out of touch, not being able to experience touch, but in a metaphoric way, to be out of touch with what's going on in their lives and interactions with others, and not calibrating really well. And so this is the kind of thing that happens when we push things away, when we refuse to see things. So Rosalind says, recognizing might include sitting with the ugly thought. Exactly. How true does it feel? Like, is it true all the time or just around certain people? So thank you for that, Rosalind, because this is a way that we can recognize the shadow and then bring it to light. So many of us are very adept at transformative vocabulary and transformative practices. As soon as we recognize that we're anxious, we do something to transform it, to shift our state, to talk ourselves out of it, to override it, to contain it, right? And the thing is that one way that we can orient ourselves toward these experiences is if we can come from a place of recognizing that these things are arising to be healed. So when we feel anxious, if we can recognize that as an opportunity to grow and learn and heal something, rather than being in the anxiety, and alternatively wanting the anxiety to stop. Rather than being at the effect of the anxiety, we can recognize the anxiety as a message, as a communication from our other than conscious being that's saying, hey, pay attention. Hey, wake up. And when we're in pain, whether it be physical or emotional pain, our typical response is to try to get the pain to stop. I want to just get rid of it. I want it to go away. And that in itself is a form of resistance and denial. When we have these experiences, we can take it as an opportunity to dive beyond it, to dive more deeply. So I can recognize that my head's going in a loop and I'm obsessing about this, that, or the other thing. If we can find the presence of mind, the presence of being, to be able to step back and say, wow, what's going on here? What am I experiencing? Oh, there's this fear. Like, to jump to a meta level and to say, oh, there's this fear, there's this anxiety. What is it I'm afraid of? What's underneath that? What memory is this evoking? When did I feel this way last? What's going on? To use these triggers as an opportunity to dig more deeply into whatever the underlying dynamic is. Oftentimes these things go back into our childhood and childhood perceptions. And I've had wonderful experiences in session work with this person who has had a very fraught relationship in memory with a parent. And it was so cool to do a process in which this the adult person was able to communicate with the parent who, from a vantage point of both a child self and their adult self. Their adult self was older than their parent was in the interaction with the child. So almost parenting the parent. And through going into this experience more deeply to say, okay, here's the initial fear that's occurring now. How can we interact with that in a way that creates harmony rather than compromise? And we talked about this last week, how nature doesn't compromise, nature creates, nature harmonizes. And so when we're able to bring the darkness to light, we're able to create this harmonization of different dimensions and different awarenesses. So what was really cool about this interaction was that the parent was this scary presence until the adult self of the client spoke to the parent and just informed them of something that they hadn't seen, that the parent was missing, that the parent misunderstood. It created understanding in the parent, and thereby the parent could relate differently to the child, and thereby the child was able to experience the parent in a different way. And it's a very interesting dynamic that allows us to truly, in this way, travel through time and to shift and rewrite history. And in fact, I had a wonderful experience with another client who we did something similar, where their adult self went to support their child self and communicate with their child self. And this person recounted a dream that they had had, a recurring dream through their lives, where they were running and through the forest to find somebody, and they had the revelation that it was themselves that they were looking for, that they had actually had an experience of somebody coming to support them when they were a child, somebody coming to support them. And in this session, they recognized that it was their adult self, like the work that we were doing where their adult self was going back. They remembering that as a child, where someone came to support them. So like, it's kind of this loop in time and this interdimensional communication and experience. Good morning, Kimberly. How wonderful to have you here with us. Welcome. And you're here from YouTube, which is really, really cool. So Enlightened World Network has a YouTube channel also that you can join our morning chats from, and apparently I can see the comments from there as well. So join us either from the Enlightened World YouTube channel or go to the Facebook page for Enlightened World Network and put your comments in there, and then I can respond to them, because I should be able to see them. If you're putting in comments and I'm not responding, it's not because I'm ignoring you, it's simply because I don't see those comments. So anyway, when we're talking about bringing light to the shadow, we cannot shift or change something that we're resisting or denying. And so there is an element of courage that is required in order to be able to unearth that darkness, in order to be willing to see that darkness, there has to be a certain degree of inner strength and wholeness in order to face that. So sometimes we're not ready. Sometimes we're just not ready. And therefore, those things that are in the shadows aren't accessible to us, because it would be too overwhelming to try to contend with it from the vantage point of our present awareness. So Kimberly says, I couldn't find you on Facebook. It was making me crazy. I want to be with you every morning. Kimberly, thank you. We want you to be with us every morning, all of us. So welcome. It's great that you found your way here through YouTube. That's awesome. So for those of you who are, who haven't tried it, or who are frustrated by trying to connect through Facebook, you might try the Enlightened World Network YouTube channel. Anyway, so we were just talking about the fact that it takes courage to face the darkness, because it means looking at our own ugly. And it may mean looking at the ugly of the world in a different, in a certain way as well. And one of the challenges to looking at our own ugly is that it's often an experience that's accompanied by tremendous guilt and shame, possibly self-hatred, all kinds of negative emotions and judgments. And so in order to bring the shadow to light, what we get to do is also recognize those judgments as part of the shadow. And as we recognize those judgments, perhaps we can allow ourselves the compassion to understand, to recognize, to truly realize that the judgment itself is truly part of the shadow. And when we can suspend the judgment long enough to look at the situation from a broader view, in a broader context, it might enable us to have a richer sense of compassion and understanding for the self that we were in those moments, to say, wow, I must have been pretty wounded to allow that kind of treatment, or I must have been pretty wounded to have that kind of behavior, or to be acting out in that way. And to say, to look at yourself in those circumstances and to say, well, how would I respond if somebody else were going through that? If I saw somebody else acting that way, or having those kinds of experiences, what would I, in my place right now, what would I think about that? What would I feel about that? What would I, how would I be relating to that person? And to come to it from a place of compassion, which then allows us, if we can separate ourselves from it. So this is another part of the mechanism that might help, is if we can create distance from being that to seeing that, then we can say, wow, I'm seeing all kinds of interactions that might have led to that kind of behavior, and the pain that might have been behind it, which is usually the case. And when we are able to have some of that compassion, then the judgment starts lifting, then the darkness also starts lifting. What happens is that somebody else said it really beautifully yesterday, when we have these things contained in these nice, neat little boxes that we push into the back of the closet. When we open the box, the intensity of that energy, the darkness of that energy dissipates, because, you know, we've allowed it to be exposed to the light. It's almost like, I don't know why this analogy came to mind, but exposing film. You know, when light hits the film, it exposes the film. And if you print that, it's just all whiteness. And what's interesting, this is also, sorry for the free association here, but I guess it's all free association. Anyway, what happens when the light hits the film is that the film turns black. And when you print that, it prints white. And I was talking to someone who is a Hebrew scholar, a scholar of the Torah, the other day. And there's all kinds of magic encoded into the Hebrew, the words, the letters, the arrangement of letters and such in the Torah that's really quite beyond comprehension in so many ways. But understanding the relationship of the letters to numbers, and they're in a relationship to meaning and magic, actually, is called gematria. And but anyway, in their conversation, we were talking about the first line of the Old Testament, you know, where it was dark and God created light. And I'm not talking about religion here. I'm just talking about what our conversation was. And this fellow told me that initially there was light, there was black light and white light, and that it was all encompassing. And it's very interesting, because I have a client who oftentimes in visualizing something would say there's this light and I can't tell if it's black light or white light. And I thought that was so fascinating. And when we, I think where this is going is that in the seeds of the shadow, in the shadow are the seeds of light. So in the darkness are seeds of bright light. And it goes back to yesterday, our talk about transmutation, transmuting the ugly into the beautiful, you know, the pain into purpose, perhaps, or well, there's so many polarities that give us access to awakening, you know. So the shadow, within the shadow are the seeds of our enlightenment. And bringing the shadow to light is an act that takes a willingness to see. So Rosalind, yesterday you were talking about how you're shedding the untruths. And so many of us create this insulation around our experiences that are kind of like adding layers of insulation to ourselves, from ourselves. And that is a kind of shadow And so when we allow ourselves to see what's there without judgment, so that's kind of one of the big keys, is to be suspending judgment. And there needs to be some kind of some degree of strength and courage, some degree of integration and integrity, from that word integration, in order to be able to face some of these dark moments without flinching so much that we run away from it. You know, we may flinch at first, because we have the shame and we have the guilt, but the shame and the guilt, as I said earlier, is part of the darkness itself. So what we want to be able to do is have the courage to face that, to face the shame, face the guilt, recognize that that's coming from judgment. As we recognize that that's coming from judgment, step back to allow ourselves to observe as if we were an observer rather than the participant. And as the observer, to be able to recognize the grander context for that experience, and then to source compassion from that place of observation that then allows us to create a place of connection and compassionate love and appreciation and acceptance for ourselves. So then that experience comes back and we're able to embody it or to metabolize it as part of our whole. And when we do that, then it becomes it's transformed from its ugliness and darkness into light and beauty. So I think that that's the process. It's a powerful, powerful process. So Kimberly says, you have such a wonderful knowledge. It's always healing and helpful. I want to thank you. Kimberly, thank you for that. I don't set myself up here saying I have all this knowledge. All I'm doing is sharing my experience, sharing what I've learned and what I'm learning. It's always unfolding. We're all in this process of growing together. But thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And with that, I think I'm going to call it a wrap for this morning. So it might be worthwhile to just walk back through that process of bringing the shadow to light, because it is when we find a way to bring light to the shadow that we then can metabolize it, and that we then allow for our wholeness, and to recognize that we are all things. Given the perfect set of circumstances, we're capable of anything, the most heinous things. And when we recognize it, it gives us a deeper sense of humility and presence, and compassion for ourselves as well as others, and a greater sense of peace and presence overall, because we don't have to be protecting or defending from the terrors that are waiting in the wings, because we've already shown light into the wings so we can see what's there. Anyway, that's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I invite you to check out all the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network, on EWN One with the Earth, and Enlightened World Living. And Kimberly says, no, you do. It always makes me feel so much better. See you tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Kimberly, great. Thank you so much. And it's really wonderful to have you here joining us. I look forward to you joining us tomorrow as well. And Rosalind says, thank you for describing the process, projecting into the future and feeling anxious about something that hasn't happened. Allowing is being aware with no judgment. The awareness can start to shift that ugly thought. 100%, 100%. So the judgment binds us into this closed loop. And when we're able to suspend judgment, then, like our eyes can be cleared some, because judgment is having a certain lens that we're looking through that restricts our vision. So when we allow ourselves to expand beyond the judgment, then we see more clearly. So that's it for today. Until next time. But first of all, I want to just say thank you, because this was an awesome conversation and I so appreciate your engagement and input. And until next time.